Evening, I'm Spot On Weather meteorologist Matthew Euler. Welcome to the Teleconnections discussion for Friday, the 21st of October, 2022. As we get closer to the Halloween season, here about 10 days out from Halloween. Another funny picture here this evening of a pumpkin, person holding it up in front of their head, making it look like that's their head. So some pretty funny stuff here as we get ready and get closer to Halloween. And there's a lot of changes in this week's Teleconnections discussion from last week. So I'm going to delve right into it right now. Right, first let's take a look at the 500 millibar height anomalies for today, Friday the 21st of October 2022. Let me get my laser pointer out here and I'll point some features out. All right, we're going to start and we're going to basically do the overall northern hemisphere is the main focus, and I'm going to brief from left to right across the northern hemisphere, and we're going to take a look at the major features that are currently going on. So we start off on the far left here with an upper level ridge generally located over Siberia, and that is extending northward up into the Arctic Ocean area. Downstream of that ridge into portions of the Northwest Pacific Ocean, specifically east of Japan, you will see a blue shading here that's indicative of lower than normal heights associated with an upper level trough. Working our way east from that, we now look at a more flattened upper level ridge across the northeastern Pacific Ocean. This ridge at one point was very strong as it bowed far to the north up into portions of the Gulf of Alaska and western North America. But now you can definitely tell that it has flattened out somewhat. Beneath that flattened upper level ridge, there's a closed upper level low situated south of it, generally to the north of the Hawaiian Islands. And then as we move further east, you'll notice this little blue enclosed area here. That is associated with another closed upper level low, which is situated just off the Southern California coast today, followed by another upper level, a little bit of ridging there into the central U.S., across the central U.S., and then a much deeper, amplified shortwave trough, which is existing from eastern Canada down the eastern seaboard all the way down the east coast. And then you'll see a stronger upper level ridge. There's a stronger upper level ridge downstream of the trough across portions of the North Atlantic extending northward up into Greenland, associated with a negative North Atlantic oscillation right now. And then there is an upper level trough, which is located over parts of northwestern Europe, including England today, followed by an upper level ridge, which is extending northeastward over central Europe, with another downstream trough there located over towards Ukraine area. So this is what's going on right now as far as the upper level features, the upper level troughs and ridges. Keep in mind the upper level ridges are typically associated with drier and warmer weather conditions, whereas the upper level troughs are associated with cooler and more unsettled conditions. And that's why we take a look at this. Not only that, but also, since we're talking teleconnections, how are things actually shaping up at the current time? So we start with that. Going now to the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation. Again, just a rehash, a review on the various phases of the MJO, ranging from phase 1, with convection in the vicinity of Madagascar, working our way eastward into phases 2 and 3, where we'd see more concentrated convection across parts of the Indian Ocean. Phases 4 and 5 of the MJO are associated with upward vertical motion and convection, rising air, over the maritime continent. And then phases 6 and 7 and 8 are generally convection, indicative of convection over the western Pacific Ocean. 8 is closer to the international dateline. And then 8 also, by the way, extends there off of the west coast of South Africa. So now that we kind of know the phases, let's take a look at the satellite imagery. First thing we're going to start off with is the whole entire Pacific Ocean basin here on the left this evening. We're looking at infrared satellite imagery. And with infrared satellite imagery, we're measuring the cloud top temperatures. Brighter clouds are indicative of colder cloud tops. And then the duller gray colors indicate lower, warmer clouds. All right, so what we got going on today here on the 21st of October across the Pacific Basin, we do see a fragmented line here to the south in the tropical areas of the Pacific. That is the Intertropical Convergence Zone, or ITCZ. And you can see how it extends from east to west across the tropical portion of the Pacific. To the north of that, you can very clearly see that there is that upper level or closed low situated northwest of the Hawaiian Islands. So you definitely see the enhanced colder cloud tops and instability associated with the upper level low. Looking back towards Japan, you'll notice some clouds there over Honshu. And then additionally, we see a much more mature system here with a frontal boundary extending southwest there over the western portions of the Aleutian Islands of Alaska. And then you see a stretch of cloudiness generally orientated more west to east, and that's extending back into the Pacific Northwest. So this is really what's going on across the Pacific Ocean basin. And one other thing I wanted to mention is the convection across this West Pacific is not as strong as I showed you last week. So we do have some rising air motion and enhanced convection, but it's not as widespread as last week. It doesn't appear to be as strongly organized as last week. There are a couple of, I believe over here, we do see I don't have the Joint Typhoon Warning Center up, but we did have a couple typhoons generally located in the Western Pacific this past week. All right, now let's turn our focus here on the right. I added this image. I think it's just as important as looking at the Pacific Basin. I've got an infrared satellite image of the Indian Ocean area, as well as parts of Australia here. Now look at this cluster here, which is generally to the southeast of India. And generally you see a lot of convection just over the Indonesia area as well as just to the west of it. And so very interesting, just to kind of see where that convection's flaring up. It looks to me this week it's more concentrated over in Indonesia and generally Sri Lanka area. And compare that Indian Ocean convection here to the Western Pacific Ocean. And additionally, it's kind of cool to look at this in the southern hemisphere. This particular latitude is 40 degrees south latitude, and they call it the Roaring 40s because basically there's a westerly wind belt down here, and there's nothing to slow the winds down. There's no land basically outside of Tasmania down here, south of the tip of Australia. But there's really no land masses down here, so this wind really roars and is very strong. And this is one of those dangerous areas if you're a mariner, if you're ever on a ship. They try to avoid these areas. These are mature cyclones, by the way. And you notice in the southern hemisphere how these fronts generally bow. The cold fronts actually go from south to north. In the northern hemisphere, our cold fronts go from north to south. So it's just kind of an interesting thing. I was in Australia one time, and I literally got this one meteorology book. It was called the Australian Bureau of Meteorology, talking about the synoptic systems in the southern hemisphere. And boy, when you're used to seeing it like this in the northern hemisphere, you really have to almost like you have to turn the book upside down to really get your bearings on the way the fronts are orientated differently in the southern hemisphere. But anyway, kind of cool. We see three specific mid-latitude systems across southern hemisphere right now over the open waters there. Right now, getting back to our discussion tonight, the Madden-Julian oscillation, MJO, showing temperature composites over here on the left. I will soon change these temperature composites to November, December, and January. But as of for right now, since we're still in the waning portion of the month of October, I will keep this up again this week. Generally, we're looking at temperature composites for the different MJO phases 1 through 8. And if you see a blue shading that indicates below normal temperatures, if you see a orange or yellow shading that's above normal temperatures or warmer than normal. All right, so right now, looking at the latest GFS Ensemble forecast here on the right, you'll notice this green line here, okay? Remember what I told you about the inner circle. Whenever this forecast goes into the inner smaller circle of the MJO phase diagram, that generally indicates a null phase to the MJO. MJO basically is not really significantly impacting the weather. The further we get with this green line, this forecast line from the model, away from the inner small circle, the further away it goes, the greater the amplitude. So right now we're not very far from that smaller inner circle, the center of the diagram, with our current MJO state. We're currently meandering around at MJO phase 6 per the latest GFS Ensemble forecast. Okay, that's what we're showing you here. This, by the way, runs through November 4th. Let's take a look at the GFS Operational MJO forecast. And I want you to pay attention to the aqua color line, okay? We just took a look at this green line here. That was our GEFS, GFS Ensemble Forecasting System forecast from MJO. Now let's take a look at just the operational GFS. And it's showing also MJO in phases 6, transitioning to 7 over time, and then working its way back into the null phase. See how it goes into the inner circle here with time? This forecast also goes out through November 4th. Look at here on the right. This is the climate forecast system, the CFS. This is a 30-day forecast. And generally, we're sitting here on the 21st of October where this green dot is. And we're in MJO phase 6. And the MJO rotates counterclockwise back around. Eventually, briefly touches phase 7, but it's very weak. Before pivoting into the null phase in this small inner circle here. And then one of the models actually has it coming back out into phase 8 around Halloween. So we'll have to see how this turns out. You know, it's always good to look at these models and kind of compare them and see if they're generally working on the same sheet of music here to give us greater confidence in the potential MJO forecast in the coming 10 days or so. Now let's take a look at the latest sea surface temperature anomalies map. And yes, La Nina continues across the equatorial eastern and central Pacific, and look how far out it stretches. I mean, it's almost running all the way to Papua New Guinea, for goodness sake. But you can see the darkest blue colors are associated with the scale here on the right. The darker blue colors indicate the much more below normal or colder sea surface temperatures. So the darker the color, the greater the difference from normal. Okay, so you'll notice right now, even though this stretches all the way out to the central Pacific and beyond the 180-degree longitude line, the international date line, it certainly looks like this is definitely focused more on a eastern-based La Nina, okay? It's just something to keep an eye on. Additionally, if we go further north in the latitude here, away from the La Nina area in the deeper tropics, we have 3 distinct areas where we have above normal sea surface temperatures. One is located at this area here in the north central and northwestern Pacific. Another above normal area for water temperatures is located off the west coast of Canada, down off the west coast of the Pacific Northwest. And these warmer waters also extends down towards Hawaii and off the California coast. So generally along the U.S. West Coast, we're seeing above normal water temperatures that would typically be associated with a positive PDO or Pacific decadal oscillation. Okay. You notice this little blue area between the above normal areas in the Pacific. And, that's associated with, we have that upper low just sitting there spinning. And, it's kicking up the seas a little bit. And as the seas kick up, we get cooler water from the greater depths to come up to the surface when those winds mix up the surface layer of the ocean. And it brings cooler temperatures to the surface. So I've been watching this area. It's kind of grown a little bit over the last 7 days, this colder than normal area, the blue area here, northwest of the Hawaiian Islands. And it makes a lot of sense with where that upper level low is positioned. Looking at the final area of above normal temperatures for the northern hemisphere, North Atlantic. Definitely off of Nova Scotia, looking off the coast of eastern Canada, all the way out further into the central and further North Atlantic. So very warm here. We do have some slightly cooler than normal water there along the east coast, specifically the mid-Atlantic right now. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Now I want to point out one other area, and that's the Indian Ocean here, where we have warmer than normal waters in the eastern portion of the Indian Ocean and cooler than normal waters in the western portion of the Indian Ocean. And this is typically associated, I believe, with that negative IOD, Indian Ocean dipole. Looking at the latest La Nina update, what do we got going on? 0.83 degrees Celsius below normal is where we currently stand. This is courtesy of Tropical Tidbits, Levi Cohen. 8.83 degrees Celsius below normal water temperatures in the Nino 3.4 region, which still meets the criteria of a weak La Nina. Now, we do comparisons here to last week. Now, if you remember what I gave in the video last week, It was 0.79 degrees Celsius below normal water temperature. So we have seen a slight cooling over the last 7 days in the Nino 3.4 region, but we still remain in the weaker La Nina category. And if again we look at the categorization of La Nina, right, what's considered weak? 0.5 to 0.9 degrees Celsius anomaly, that's weak. So we're still just under this moderate threshold of 1 to 1.4 degrees Celsius. And if we have a strong La Nina, that means our water temperatures in this Nino 3.4 region are 1.5 to 1.9 degrees Celsius below normal in this Nino 3.4 area. Okay. By the way, this is, again, I always put this up here for your information. If you were to box out the 3.4 region, that Nino 3.4 region, these would be the latitudes and this would be the bounded longitudes. Now, let's take a look at the latest updated La Nina forecast here on the left. This is from the early October edition, and this is from the Climate Prediction Center. The blue vertical bars indicating La Nina forecast probability. The gray vertical bars is ENSO neutral conditions, and the red vertical bar would be indicative of El Nino. Right? Now, the probability is right over here on the far left. And then we have on the x-axis here, we have the cluster 3-month intervals of the months. So right now we're sitting in October, November, and December, and you can see how tall this blue bar is, indicating a higher, above 90% probability of La Nina conditions. Well, that makes a lot of sense because it's currently occurring. Now, as we go through time, November, December, January, we're decreasing to about 85% probability of La Nina. December, January, and February, meteorological winter, we're down to 72, 73% probability of La Nina continuing. When we get down into January, February, and March, now we're getting into the middle to the latter part of the winter, we're looking at just below a 60% probability of La Nina. And then we continue to work our way to February, March, and April. Now, look at this drop-off. Now we're looking at the ENSO neutral conditions potentially taking over and having a greater probability above 50% to just the 42% for La Nina in the February, March, April time period. Okay? And then definitely by next spring into the summer, we're looking at ENSO neutral conditions. All right, so bottom line here is we have a weakening La Nina. Question of the day really is, when is it going to weaken? At what stage of the winter season will it weaken? Will it wait till after winter to weaken? Here's the latest IRI models, dynamical models, generally showing an upward trend no matter what model we're talking about, based on whatever line or color we're looking at. We're noticing a trend up towards the neutral condition territory. What's neutral? That is water temperatures basically between 0.5 and negative 0.5 degrees Celsius in the Nino 3.4 region. The anomaly is positive 0.5 to negative 0.5 degrees Celsius. And we're heading up in that territory as we continue to move into, let's see, we're at 0.5 for the months of February. Could be a little bit warmer in February, March, and April in that Nino 3.4 region. So bottom line is, I just don't see it being a traditional La Nina winter. I just don't see it. Not with a weakening trend of this. Now let's take a look at the Teleconnections forecast. We'll start with the Arctic Oscillation, the AO. This again is a review of the differences between a negative AO on the left and a positive AO on the right. Just realize that negative AOs are typically associated with weakened polar vortexes, and a positive AO is associated with a stronger polar vortex where you keep the coldest air locked up over the North Pole area. Okay, it's milder in the mid-latitudes. We have more of a west to east jet stream with a positive AO. Coldest air remains up over the Arctic, like I said, with a stronger polar vortex with a positive AO. Let's take a look at the forecast now. The ECMWF, the European Deterministic AO forecast, generally showing a neutral trend through the 21st, through today, the 21st of October. Then AO becoming slightly positive through about the 28th of October. The European EPS AO 50 perturb member showing a neutral to slightly positive trend to the AO through 5 November, going all the way out to 5 November on the far right here. So generally neutral and then becoming slightly positive according to this European EPS. The European EPS 50 perturb members, now this one goes out 46 days into the future. So we're going all the way out to the first week of December with this one. This one, interestingly, shows more of a neutral to slightly positive through middle November, very similar to the other models. However, you'll notice this green line here, that's your ensemble mean or average, that goes back into the negative territory after mid-November. So this will be interesting to watch. Looking at the GFS deterministic AO forecast, showing a slightly positive trend. You notice these white circular lines here. Positive above the 0 line through 6 November, all the way up through 6 November. Fairly positive, maybe a little bit of a dip to the negative there around the 5th of November, but it's very short-lived. And then the ECMWF V12 AO 30 perturb members showing a slightly positive trend to the AO right on through the 6th of November. Turning our attention now to the North Atlantic Oscillation NAO forecast. Here are the differences between a positive phase NAO on the left and a negative NAO phase on the right. Basic major difference here is the jet stream orientation. Positive NAO phase, more of a west to east zonal jet, and then the negative NAO phase, more of a meridional jet with a blocking area of high pressure up into Greenland across the North Atlantic. Looking at the forecast, European deterministic NAO forecast, generally what we're expecting, according to the European deterministic, is slightly negative tendency to start and then becomes neutral through the 25th of October and then slightly positive. The European EPS NAO 50 perturb member forecast showing a near neutral state to slightly positive right on through the 5th of November. The European EPS NAO 50 perturb members, paying attention to this green line here, that's your ensemble mean or average, generally showing a neutral to slightly positive NAO through the 25th of November, all the way up to 25 of November, then slightly negative after that. Looking at the GFS deterministic NAO forecast, generally showing a neutral to slightly positive state through 5 November, then potentially negative after that. And you will notice some of these timestamps in the upper right. The different colors here between the orange and the red, that indicates the differences in the model runs. So orange is actually indicative or indicating today's run at 06Z, and then this maroon one is today's run at 12Z. So the 06Z run had it much more negative around the 5th of November than the other particular model here, that'd be the 12Z run. Looking at the ECMWF V12 NAO 30 perturb member forecast, right on out through the 6th of November, near neutral conditions to the NAO on this forecast model through the 26th of October, then slightly positive through 4 November before becoming neutral again. Now on to the Pacific North American forecast. This PNA is really being the dominant teleconnection right now. Here's a review of the differences between a positive PNA in the bottom left and a negative PNA in the bottom right. Just realize a positive PNA is associated with an upper level ridge across Western North America with a downstream fairly amplified trough across Eastern North America, specifically Eastern US. And then a negative PNA is the opposite. We get a trough across Western North America, Western Canada down to the Western US, and a ridge across the Eastern US with a negative PNA. Here is the actual breakout of positive versus negative PNA. Positive PNA, below normal temps across the Eastern US, and then negative PNA, we get more of above normal temperatures across the Eastern US. So what is it going to be now? This is where the biggest changes occurred between last week and this week, and let's take a look. Look at this. We are in negative territory and we continue to drop. This is a European deterministic PNA forecast, and we are dropping negative, okay? We slightly recover between 23 and 25 October, then we dip back down again, and then we kind of get closer to neutral right around the end of October towards Halloween. But this is a sharply negative PNA pattern. What does that mean? Remember, we mentioned it here in the bottom right. That means below average temperatures across the Western US and Canada, and it's associated with a trough out in the West. And then above average temperatures are in the Eastern US, right? The European EPS, PNA, 50 perturb member forecast, similar. Negative, 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 and then eventually it works its way to slightly negative, a little bit closer to neutral as we get into the first week of November. Looking at the European EPS, PNA 50 perturb member forecast, This goes out 46 days into early December, generally showing a sharply negative PNA all the way through the 26th of October. So over the next 5 days, we're dealing with a sharply negative PNA, trough in the western U.S. and a ridging more in the eastern U.S., and then climb slightly to slightly negative territory before transitioning neutral there as we go into just beyond the 11th day of November. The GFS deterministic PNA forecast showing again that sharp crash. We were sharply positive PNA earlier this week, and that's what resulted in that huge ridge building up in the western North America and western Canada. And then we had that very, very deep trough across the eastern U.S., set tons of record temperatures, record high minimums, record lows that have just stood the test of time. One of the coldest October periods in quite some time. But generally showing you now we're on the negative side of the PNA, the temperatures are adjusting. In general, what we're looking at is return to neutral conditions in early November with it. So it's going to be a while in the negative territory. ECMWF V12 PNA, 30 perturbed members, showing a sharply negative PNA, then slightly negative through early November. So you see it just slightly negative, the ensemble mean here, just about -1 value or magnitude. Now let's move on to the Eastern Pacific Oscillation Forecast EPO. A review again here, negative EPO on the left and a positive EPO on the right. Big difference here for the United States weather. With a negative EPO, you're going to get much more colder outbreaks across northern plains, Midwest. The jet stream takes a big dip into the United States. And then with a positive EPO, you get more of that deeper Aleutian low south of the Aleutian Islands there. And then you get more milder Pacific air flooding the U.S. with a positive EPO. So let's take a look at the forecast here. European deterministic EPO forecast showing near neutral conditions through the 26th of October. Then this EPO becomes sharply positive from the 27th to the 30th of October. Looking at the European EPS, the Ensemble Prediction System EPO 50 perturbed member forecast, again, the tendency in this model is showing a sharply positive EPO between 27 October to 3 November. Look at this, all the way up to the 3rd of November, and then becoming slightly positive, a little bit closer to that, just under the +2 line. The European EPS, EPO, 50 perturbed members out 46 days into the future, into early December. Look how positive the European EPS, the 50 perturbed members, is predicting this to be. Yeah, sharply positive through 3 November, then dropping to negative middle to late November. And finally, GFS deterministic EPO forecast, again showing a pretty significantly positive magnitude to the EPO right through the 31st of October through Halloween, and then remaining positive throughout. Okay, what does this mean? I mean, look, positive EPO, if this verifies, look what's going to happen. It's going to be fairly mild across the United States, at least in early November. Right, now let's take a look at the stratosphere. Let's look at that polar vortex. Let's look at the GFS forecast. I will show you the GFS, the European deterministic, as well as the GEFS, GFS Ensemble forecasting system, for the polar vortex forecast. Graphics on the left are going to be today, the current day, what it looks like right now today, and the forecast 7 days out will be on the right of each of these upcoming slides. So right now what we got is, by the way, you're looking at temperature plus the anomalies in degrees Celsius. So you can see the scale here over on the right of each of the graphics. So blue coloring indicates colder than normal. These are colder than normal stratospheric temperatures. The oranges are above normal stratospheric temperatures. And we're looking up at 10 millibars, by the way, on these charts. That's at about 60,000 feet above the ground. So below normal stratospheric temperatures exist from right over the polar area, extending down into Greenland, on into eastern Canada and the eastern US. And we do have some slightly warmer than normal stratospheric temperatures across western Canada, Alaska, on into Siberia. Looking at 7 days in the GFS forecast, showing a little bit more significant warming here by this brighter orange coloring here across, that would be parts of the Arctic area just over eastern Siberia, here by next Friday, the 28th of October. The cooler than normal temperatures associated with the polar vortex in general remain over parts of and it appears to be more of northwestern Europe by next Friday. There is some indications that longer range beyond this graphic on the right, next Friday, of another potential stretched polar vortex event in the first week of November. So we'll have to see how that pans out. The European polar vortex forecast, very similar. Cooler than normal temperatures. Now these are in degrees Celsius. Scale again is on the right of each of the graphics. So for today, the 21st of October, we have cooler than normal stratospheric temperatures from the eastern US up to eastern Canada on over to parts of the North Atlantic, as well as parts of northern Europe into Siberia. And then over here on the right, we show cooler than normal temperatures at the stratosphere at 10 millibar level, generally associated over here, North Atlantic, just to the east of Greenland, and in the vicinity of the British Isles. Cooler than normal stratospheric temperatures across parts of the US. And then the polar vortex forecast from the GFS Ensemble forecasting system, the GEFS. Here's today, showing a very similar pattern, cooler than normal stratospheric temperatures from Greenland on into Siberia, across the Arctic Ocean, working its way down over parts of the Northwest Atlantic and eastern US and eastern Canada. Warmer than normal temperatures today in the stratosphere exist over western and central Canada, Alaska, as well as parts of Asia. Here's the forecast on the GEFS from the GEFS model for next Friday, the 28th of October, showing the polar vortex generally in this location in the vicinity just to the northeast of Greenland. In general, we see cooler than normal stratospheric temperatures, and then we have warming temperatures there across parts of the far northern reaches of the Bering Sea into parts of Siberia. Again, these models, just the bottom line here, potential weakening could occur in early November, but we'll have to watch this and see how the trends continue into the future. Now let's take a look at the 500 millibar height anomalies, the heights and anomalies. These anomalies are in meters. Anytime you see purple, green, or blue, that's indicative of upper level trough, cooler and unsettled conditions. Whenever you see the brighter reddish, orangish color and brown, that's indicative of upper level ridges. That's where we have dry and mild conditions. So let's start up here in the upper left with the forecast for this Sunday, 500 millibar anomalies. Generally, we have that trough associated with a negative PNA situated over the western U.S., very cool temperatures, very low heights, and more unsettled conditions across the western U.S. We do see the upper level ridge generally extending up into parts of the northeastern Pacific, just south of Alaska. Additionally, we have an upper level ridge this Sunday morning extending across parts of New England into southeastern Canada. Now moving on, here the upper right graphic, this is for Tuesday morning, the 25th of October, showing that upper level trough moving slightly to the east into parts of the Texas Panhandle area. We do expect cool conditions from western Canada into Montana, as well as that Texas-Oklahoma area. We do have a fairly strong upper level ridge positioned over Nova Scotia by Tuesday morning. And I label this pattern reversal because we have a cooler west and a warmer east. Bottom left here showing the 500 millibar geopotential height anomaly forecast for, this would be, this is Saturday, next Saturday the 29th, Saturday morning the 29th of October. Look what's happening here now. We see a very strong upper level, low and lower than normal heights in the green shading over parts of Alaska associated with colder temperatures. That trough extends to southward just offshore of the U.S. Pacific Northwest. And we also have a little bit of a troughing feature across parts of the Missouri Valley by next Saturday morning. And we do have higher heights over the top across parts of Hudson Bay over eastward to parts of eastern Canada and New England. One thing I want you to pay attention to is look how much less amplified this pattern is becoming over time. So by the time we get to the bottom right graphic here, this is the forecast, the height anomaly forecast of 500 millibars for Tuesday, the 1st of November, 2022. So the very first day of November, we see that those cooler temperatures and lower heights, lower than normal heights, now directly off the west coast of Canada into parts of Western Canada itself. We do see that cool trough working southward into the Pacific Northwest as well. And then eastward, we now have the upper level ridging over parts of eastern Canada. Looking now at the GEFS 500 millibar or hectopascal level, geopotential height anomalies, very similar here in the upper left. We have that trough in the western U.S., cool temperatures, unsettled conditions for this Sunday morning, the 23rd of October. And we see that upper level ridge fairly strong from the northwest Atlantic into parts of New England and southeastern Canada. We also do have a troughing feature off the southeast coast this Sunday morning, and that may be enough to kick off a surface low pressure system that kind of just skirts the coast and produces a little bit of wind and some shower activity from the Virginia and Eastern Carolina area northward into parts of New England Sunday into Monday. Looking at the forecast here in the upper right for the GEFS for the Tuesday morning, 25 October, we see very similar troughing extending from western Canada down into the Texas Panhandle area. We do see the upper level ridge continuing over parts of New England to southeastern Canada. And then bottom left here, the forecast for next Saturday, the 29th of October, according to GEFS, very similar with the placement of the features. Troughing in Alaska, a closed low there with a trough extending off the Pacific Northwest coast, and then above normal heights and milder temperatures across the eastern U.S. for next Saturday. And then again, the jet stream is polar front jet is becoming more zonal over time. So by the 25th of October, we have more of a west to east flow of air from the Pacific Ocean across the United States as we have a flattened jet stream, more west to east, more zonal. And here again is the reversal of pattern from last week. This is the big change with a negative PNA. What are we looking at here? Green is below normal temperatures. Red and browns are above normal temperatures. This is for this Monday, the 24th of October, this upcoming Monday in a few days. Look how much above normal conditions are. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, down to northern Missouri, all the way down to parts of Oklahoma and Texas, above normal temperatures. In fact, in this brown area here, we could see temperatures 20 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than normal for the Midwest by this upcoming Monday morning, the 24th of October. And then we have 10 to 15 degrees below normal temperatures for the western U.S., Nevada, New Mexico, and Utah. And above normal temperatures extend from the mid-Atlantic up into New England this Monday morning coming up too, where temperatures, overnight lows may be 10 to 15 degrees above normal for New York State, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, that particular area. Looking at the forecast for the temperature anomalies, degrees Fahrenheit for next Wednesday, or this upcoming Wednesday, the 26th of October, you see where the cooler temperatures are. They're west of the Mississippi River. We still have 10 to 15 to 20 degree above normal temperature anomalies there from the mid-Atlantic, Virginia, up to Pennsylvania and New York State, and up right into New England. Looking at the longer range ensembles now, the European EPS. Here's the forecast for next Saturday, the 29th of October. On the right, I have the forecast for Monday, Halloween, the 31st of October. Generally, we see lower heights, upper level low, fairly strong over Alaska. Coolest temperatures and the trough extending down along the west coast of Canada into off the Pacific Northwest coast. And we continue to see the persistent ridge over parts of the Northwest Atlantic into New England and into southeastern Canada. So milder conditions where you see the oranges, and cooler than normal conditions where you see these greens specifically, and also the blues down into the Pacific Northwest. Looking at the forecast here on the right for Monday, Halloween, the 31st of October, we do see more of a west to east jet stream establishing itself. So this ridge is beginning to weaken over the New England, southeastern Canada area, and this trough is starting to stretch a little bit. You can see the height contours kind of stretching out a little bit more elongation to it. So here are my final thoughts on tonight's video. MJO is currently in phases 6 and 7. Just kind of meandering around there, gradually transitioning to the null phase. That's the forecast as we get into early November. That's going to favor near normal to slightly above normal temperatures across the eastern U.S. Specifically, if we have lower amplitude MJO. La Nina conditions do continue across the equatorial eastern and central Pacific. We're now sitting at 0.83 degrees Celsius below normal water temps in that Nino 3.4 region. When you have La Nina conditions, that typically favors a ridge and milder temperatures across the southeastern U.S. Sea surface temperature anomalies, we took a look at that. Warmer than normal water across the northeastern Pacific, as well as the North Atlantic. That, the greater that anomaly gets, the warmer the anomaly is across the North Pacific and North Atlantic, there is potential for the development of blocking highs. We get the storm track over this warmer than normal water, it definitely could mix things out, and those warmer than normal anomalies may not be as great over time, but we'll have to watch how that all transpires. But in general, you get blocking high situations depending on where that blocking high sets up over the eastern Pacific. That, if it's right along the western Canada and U.S. west coast, then that would favor troughing and colder temperatures across the east. But we have to keep an eye on that. Now, models are indicating a neutral to occasionally positive AO phase through early November. Neutral phase will favor near normal temps across the eastern U.S., whereas a positive phase of the AO will favor warmer temperatures across the eastern U.S., with more zonal west to east polar front jet stream configuration. And then lastly, models are indicating a neutral NAO phase through early November. Neutral phase favors near normal temps across the eastern U.S. And then finally, looking at how the models are indicating a sharply negative PNA followed by a neutral PNA in early November. So at least between now and the end of October, things look really mild with that negative PNA really being the dominant teleconnection. We're seeing below normal heights and troughing and colder temperatures over the western U.S. That'll continue right through the end of October with higher than normal heights, ridging, and milder temperatures across the eastern U.S. Models additionally are indicating a positive EPO phase through early November, and we talked about that. I showed you the forecast. Positive phase favors a stronger zonal west-east polar front jet stream configuration. With a positive phased EPO, most of the U.S. is going to experience milder Pacific air. And then this third bullet, models are indicating a strengthening stratospheric polar vortex through late October. That would favor milder temperatures generally across the mid-latitudes, not only the eastern U.S., but also all the way across the U.S. And there are indications that the polar vortex could be stretching out or becoming elongated the first week of November. That could result in colder temperatures in November, returning to the eastern U.S. and potentially in parts of Europe as well. So the overall assessment from tonight's Teleconnections discussion, the next 7 to 10 days, it's looking mild across the eastern United States, and colder, more unsettled across the western U.S. Thanks to that strongly negative PNA, we have a milder MJO phase, although it's not very amplified. It's milder in phase 6, potentially meandering around there on that phase 7 border. And then we also got a near neutral AO and NAO. In general, what we're looking at is that pattern has reversed. That's the big changes from last week to this week. We had a major trough in the east this past week, record cold temperatures all the way down to the deep south, all the way down to Florida. Frosts all the way down to Georgia in October. Impressive stuff. But in general, now things have changed. So in general, I wanted to mention, the National Weather Service, NOAA, Climate Prediction Center, just released their winter forecast. I'm sure you may have seen it already all over social media. But yeah, I'm really intrigued by how their placement is of the probabilities of above normal temperatures. Definitely going off of a typical La Nina pattern. I just don't believe it's going to be a typical La Nina winter. Not with a weakening La Nina. When does that La Nina weaken though? To me, that's the key question. If it's, by February, or let's say by late January, early February, we could have a really interesting end of the winter. If the La Nina weakens even further, and we get closer to ENSO neutral conditions. Plus, we have to watch, of course, the strength of that stratospheric polar vortex, whether it stays strong, whether it weakens. What about the high latitude blocking configurations, which promote more weakening of the polar vortex? So there's a lot of interesting things I'm watching really closely for the upcoming weather pattern. But right now, it's looking really mild. All these teleconnections favor general mild conditions across the eastern U.S. right on through the end of October. So that's it. That's all I got tonight. Thank you so much for watching the video. Really enjoyed talking about this type of thing. It really intrigues me, and I hope you learn a lot in the process while just watching and listening to the video. All right, that's all I got for the night. And until next time, everybody, take care and God bless.